Hello. In today's video, I would like to start by sending my love, thoughts, and prayers to Ahmaud Arbery's family for their very tragic loss. Their son was shot in February in Georgia, and regardless of the outcome of any legal pursuit, I do want to say that it was a terrible, tragic loss, and it should never have happened in the first place. For those of you who don't know me, I am a diversity and inclusion expert. I promote gender equality. I work on anti-discrimination and anti-oppression, and I really do everything I possibly can to make sure that these kinds of events don't happen, that the microaggressions that we face on a daily basis, all the way to this kind of hate crime, doesn't happen. Now, as tragic as this situation was, there are 3 or 4 things that really stood out for me that I wanted to bring to the attention of the public, and that have shown up in different ways, but related ways, in the work that I do across the globe. The first thing that really struck me was this idea of confusing 2 potentially different Black people, and the notion that they thought they knew who he was. Now, I have worked in organizations where, senior leaders have said, we want more people of color in our organization. We feel that that should be a priority for diversity. However, when I speak to the people of color who are already there, they tell me that their managers and their leaders, who are often white, confuse them for each other. So they don't even know the difference between George and Ahmed because they're both Black people. And I think this is something that we are seeing all over the world, not just in Arbery's case, but everywhere. We're seeing that people of color are often treated in a very lazy way. They are, it's like it's okay to not take the time to get to know individuals and to be able to distinguish one from another and to develop enough of a relationship that you know who you're talking to, you know their name, and you know that they are not the same as the other person that works in your office. And I think that the key takeaway around the confusion piece is we must make the effort to get to know each other. It is not okay, it is not acceptable to confuse one person of color with another person of color and say, I just made an innocent mistake. If that's happened to you, this is your wake-up call to stop being lazy and to start taking action to make sure you are developing relationships with people and acknowledging and getting to know them for who they are. The second thing that stood out for me around this particular story and case was that he was presumed as being guilty. Now, whether or not they were able to confirm what happened, all of that is not the point here. The point is that different groups in society are part of a stereotype. They're not independent of the stereotypes and the history that they come with. And so when you see a Black person running away, you are automatically going to make assumptions that he's done something wrong, that he's trying to hide something, that he's probably a criminal with a record. And I want us to check those assumptions when we're triggered by them, because it's often not true. People should not be, even though they should not be lumped in with the historical stereotypes that their communities have had to struggle with and that have been painted by in the past. I know, for example, that when I went to Winnipeg in Canada and I was working with an individual who was part of a sexual harassment case against him, he was of Indigenous descent. And what I learned as I unpacked the layers of the case that was going on in that situation was that there was a historical association that Aboriginals, Indigenous people in Canada, are drunkards, they are non-professional, they don't know how to treat people with respect, that they're very aggressive. And there was, regardless of what he had done, he had been suffering from being related to and being treated as if he was a criminal before he had even done anything to begin with. And so I think we need to be responsible for our own shortcuts, mental shortcuts, when we take a person's history, their background, the community that they come from, and we associate those stereotypes with them without getting to know them as individuals and without giving them the benefit of the doubt. Now, in many cases, it is true that individuals who come from a particular marginalized community or background are more likely to actually have the same dynamics play out, which contributes to higher rates of criminalization, higher rates of breaking the law, higher rates of doing things that normally shouldn't be done. However, I think that we as a community have a responsibility to make sure that we don't project that historical stereotype on individuals because they come from that community. I think that that adds to our discrimination of them and creates a situation where they are not being set up to succeed, even if they are not acting out and being that way. Now, the third thing that really stood out for me about this particular situation was the notion of dignity. You know, they, regardless of what the situation was, they were not mandated to make a formal arrest. You know, they took it in their own hands. Yes, they may have had the right for citizenship arrest, and they could have done that in a way that maintained his dignity as a human being. Now, when it comes to discrimination, race-based, gender-based, any kind of based discrimination, what we know is that the underlying emotion, the underlying thought in your mind as you're discriminating against someone is that they are not equal to you, that they do not deserve the respect, the gentleness, the benefit of the doubt that you would give to somebody else who you felt was equal to you. And so this idea of interacting with individuals, whether or not they have done anything wrong, with dignity being part of the picture is very, very important, because even if he had done something wrong, as many people do when they are interacting with an arrest or even formal police, they must be treated in such a way that their dignity as human beings are held as part of the process and are honored as much as possible. And we are seeing a lot, not only in the US, but all over the world, where criminals or individuals who are accused of being criminals, or even those who are not, in the case of Ahmaud Arbery, are treated without that dignity. And that is a fundamental foundational piece. And I've seen this in my work time and again, that when somebody did something towards another person, whether it was a man assaulting a woman, or whether it was one person of one race affecting or violating somebody else of another race, or even if it was somebody doing something homophobic, the underlying emotion is that they are not equal to me. And this must be addressed, because as long as we walk around feeling like there are groups of people who are not equal to us, we will continue to treat them with a lack of dignity, and we will continue to do things that are absolutely not okay and not acceptable under any circumstance. Now, finally, the last thing I want to talk about that really stood out for me in the story is accountability. So regardless of what he had done previously, what they were accusing him of, what they thought he had done, everything that took place, there was a real breakdown in accountability, in the sense that they crossed the line about how they behaved and what they did in terms of taking action. But not only that, there was such a lapse in accountability right afterwards in terms of how things were moved forward beyond that. And I think we must all be personally accountable, particularly if you think about those who witness things that are happening around us. How many of us, this is called bystander intervention, how many of us actually take the time to intervene when we see something escalating, when we see something that's inappropriate or wrong happening? We know that there was someone that was recording this whole interaction happening, and they didn't put the phone down to call 911. Now, we heard many different stories about why that was the case, that they heard police coming, they knew police were on the way, they didn't want to take an active role in what was happening, etc. But I think that 9 times out of 10, we have, if we feel responsible, the ability to intervene in such a way that it doesn't escalate to the point where it did in this case. And so those are 4 things I want us to think about. The first one is, confusing people. The second one is stereotyping and projecting stereotypes that are not true. The third one is what was the third one? Dignity, you know, treating people with dignity. And the fourth one is accountability, being personally accountable for our communities, our spaces, whether it's in a bus that I'm riding in or on a station platform, or whether it's in an organization where we're seeing things happen. We have a collective responsibility to have each other's back and to make sure that this kind of thing does not happen under our watch. I hope these takeaways were helpful for you, and I look forward to sharing more around my work and how we can make equality, diversity, and inclusion a real thing for all of us.